40 years, of water under the bridge means something for all of us. I've been thinking about that. So we should all four get together into the studio here for decades. Fans begged for an ABBA reunion, but Benny Andersson stayed silent now. 45 years later, he's finally breaking his silence with shocking claims. Was it heartbreak fame or something darker that kept them apart? What he revealed might change. How you see ABBA forever in the year 2000? Something almost unbelievable happened. ABBA, one of the most legendary pop groups in history, was offered a staggering $1 billion to reunite for a 100-show world tour. That's right, billion with a B. It could have been the biggest comeback in music history. But they said no, flat out. No hesitation, fans were stunned. Whispers flew. What could have possibly led them to walk away from a deal? That massive. Was there something going on behind the scenes that the world didn't know about over time? The mystery only deepened, and people began to believe they'd never get a real answer to be together as a group. Again, has been very fulfilling. We really have loved working together. But now, after 45 long years, Benny Andersson is opening up, and what he's sharing reveals a story that's not about money or fame. It's about something much deeper, something that no matter how large could fix back in the early 80s, ABBA was still on top. Their music topped charts, filled stadiums, and shaped an entire generation of pop fans. But as Benny Andersson recently revealed, something inside the group had quietly started to change in a candid interview. He explained that the creative spark, the very thing that made their music so special, was slowly fading. You can't force it, he said. It either happens or it doesn't. And for ABBA, that spark had always been the secret ingredient. Without it, making music didn't feel the same. Behind the scenes, the members felt that shift too. A couple of years ago, must have been in 71 or 97. They still worked professionally, but something unspoken had changed the easy connection, the shared excitement. It wasn't there anymore, and that made everything harder. They realized that continuing without that unique energy might do more harm than good. So instead of pushing through and risking their legacy, they made the tough decision to step away quietly without drama, but also without answers until now. After ABBA stepped back, each member chose a different path. For Agnetha Feltzig, life in the spotlight had become overwhelming. The constant touring, flashing cameras, and public attention had taken a toll, so she made a bold decision. She walked away from the fame and settled back in Sweden, focusing on her family and finding peace in a quieter life. Anni-Frid did something similar. She moved to Switzerland and became more selective with her music, for we needed time to do that. And if we would have been on the road, there would her the ABBA chapter had ended naturally, and she didn't feel the need to revisit it. Meanwhile, Benny Andersson and Björn weren't ready to stop creating, but they didn't want to replicate ABBA either. Instead, they channeled their creativity into musicals like the hit show Chess. It gave them a new way to tell stories through music, one that felt exciting and different. Each member drifted in a direction that felt right for them. There was no fight, no public falling out, just a quiet turning of the page on their own terms. Even though they weren't performing together, ABBA's bond didn't just vanish, but being that close for so long. Traveling, creating, sharing every major moment. It naturally created emotional weight, and it's nice when it fits together, isn't it? Yeah, it should. Yeah, I think yeah. That's the first Benny has shared that. While there was no bitterness, there were unspoken cracks. You can't go through that much life together without leaving a few marks. It wasn't about anger. It was about space healing. Anni-Frid also spoke about this in an old interview, saying they were so young when the success hit, everything happened fast, and they had to grow up in the public eye after ABBA. She needed time to reflect on who she was outside of the group. Rebuilding those relationships wasn't something that could happen overnight. It took years, decades even, to understand what they had gone through together and how to move forward, not as bandmates, but simply as people. And before any talk of music could happen, they had to repair those bonds away from the cameras. Throughout those years, offers kept coming in, from exclusive concerts to massive tours. Everyone wanted ABBA back, but no matter how tempting the proposal, the answer was always the same. No, we sit down, piano, guitar, trying to write music. You realize that this why? Because for them, it was never just about performing again. It was about the feeling behind it, the intention. Benny explained that if they had said yes to the billion-dollar offer, it would have been for all the wrong reasons, and that wasn't who they were. Björn echoed this sentiment, saying they couldn't face their fans if it was just about money. It would have felt fake, and ABBA from the start had always been about honesty in the music and with each other. While many other artists from their era reunited and toured for nostalgia, ABBA stayed true to their belief that if the magic was gone, so was the music, and they weren't willing to pretend otherwise. But then something unexpected came along, something that didn't feel like going backward but forward. In the late 2000s, a new idea started floating around, something no one saw coming. What if ABBA could perform without being on stage in person? What if they could create digital versions of themselves and bring their younger energy back to life? My father and grandfather taught me how to play the accordion at the age of 6. At first, it sounded like a novelty, but to the group, it sparked something deeper. It felt fresh, inventive. And most importantly, it didn't feel like a comeback. It felt like an evolution. They embraced the concept of digital avatars called avatars, and slowly the wheels began turning. Suddenly working together didn't feel like pressure. It felt like curiosity. As Björn later shared the idea of doing something futuristic appealed to them, it allowed them to reimagine their legacy through a modern lens, not just replay it. And most importantly, it offered a way forward that felt true to their creative spirits. But before any studio sessions could begin, something else had to happen, something far more personal. Get outside the framework of what the 4-minute pop songs do. They had to reconnect as friends for years. Their interactions had been limited, polite, distant, but slowly overshared conversations and quiet moments. Those walls began to fall. Benny said during the Voyage press tour, "We had to rebuild the friendships first, and that shift changed everything." When they felt that old connection return, not the fame, not the applause, but the trust, they began to consider the possibility of making music again. Not for a tour, not for money, but for the sake of seeing what might still be possible between them. There was no grand announcement, no pressure, just a feeling that maybe, just maybe, something special could happen. Two guys we can choose together. We said I could say, "I think this is great," and be almost said, Section 8. The studio surprise. When they finally walked back into the studio, it wasn't with the intention of making a hit record. It was more of a quiet experiment. After all, it had been decades. The chemistry might have disappeared. The instincts could have dulled. And maybe, just maybe, the spark that made them. ABBA was long gone, so they kept expectations low. There were no cameras, no headlines, and no pressure from record labels. It was just the four of them, and a question: what happens if we try this again? And then something strange happened. As soon as they started playing, something clicked. The old rhythm came back, not in a loud, dramatic way, but gently, like a familiar melody that had been buried for years. Benny later described it as almost surreal. They weren't trying to chase their past sound, yet what came out of those sessions felt unmistakably like ABBA. The harmonies fell into place. The melodies had that same signature shimmer. It was like the years had melted away. Even more surprising, there was no tension, no disagreements, all sort of put together on one album with just me playing. The energy in the room was calm, joyful, even playful. They were no longer trying to prove anything. This time, the only goal was to enjoy the process. Byron said in one interview that it felt like stepping into a time machine. But with the wisdom of age, we weren't the same people, but the way we worked together hadn't changed. He said there was trust, and that made all the difference. Another key difference: there was no pressure to deliver chart toppers. Nobody was watching the clock. Nobody was asking for radio-friendly singles. This wasn't about feeding the industry. It was about feeling the music again. The group knew they didn't owe anyone a new hit. They just wanted to make something that felt real. As they continued recording, they were amazed by how much they still had to say. The songs on Voyage weren't just echoes of their past. They were reflections of their journey. The lyrics carried the weight of time, change, and perspective. They weren't trying to sound young again. Instead, they embraced where they were. Now take a track. Like "I Still Have Faith in You." It wasn't just a song, it was a message, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they'd been through and a celebration of what remained. Listeners could feel the emotion in every word, every note. It was personal, honest. And then there was "Don't Shut Me Down," a song full of energy, groove, and that signature ABBA flair. But even in its upbeat rhythm, there was something deeper, a message of resilience, of discovery. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to dive deeper into the untold stories of iconic bands, check out our next video now.